don't know if I'm going to be able to keep a straight face, pal.
This is certainly going to, right, what we're going to do then is we're going to record this, just you and I, after our eventful end to the informal CFU meeting. I'm not sure Lynn Davis will be invited to the first one of the Blues Bar.
Why not?
I just want to know if she's a paid up CFU member. I think Jack will get invited on his list. I guess we'll start off the questions again then. So obviously prior to the meeting, we asked supporters to put forward their questions. So first one, given the uncertainty around the end of the season, how do you feel about the current situation?
Yeah, obviously there's two views, isn't there? There's the one with the manager's hat on and being absolutely devastated because of league positions or performances and having such a good team out there on the pitch. And then there's the other side of it of the supporters not getting to see it, obviously through over the last few years, the hardships that we've gone through as a football club to finally have a team on a pitch. And I don't want to do a disservice to the previous teams that we've had either, by the way, but what I mean is we've sort of hit a standard recently that we expected to with this group of players, and for the supporters not to be in and watching it and only having a couple of samples of it when, just before Christmas, really takes quite a bit of the gloss off it, to be honest. So gutted, mainly for the supporters and the players. But obviously, the fact that we knowing what we know with the pandemic and being what we've been through, it was always likely to happen. So in the back of your mind, with the constant not allowing supporters to come in, the constant news coming out about cases rising and unfortunately the amount of deaths, it was always there in the back of your mind that something like this was going to happen. But I told you I had to keep it straight. It's you. I'm
just smiling because people are still coming in the waiting room now. I'm just smiling. I'm not going to invite them in. Go
on. So gutted, absolutely gutted. Understandable I say understandable, in total agreement of our decision as a football club, why we made that decision. But I think the overriding thought and emotion is one of disappointment, but absolute and total understanding.
You talked there about how well we've done this season. How difficult do you think it's going to be to keep the squad together moving forward?
Listen, the only reason it's going to be difficult is because other clubs are going to be sniffing naturally. I don't like using the fact that bigger clubs are going to be sniffing, but it'll be clubs that have far deeper pockets than what we have, and unfortunately, at every single level of football, and since the game started, in terms of paying players, there's always been that worry of losing players to better and well-funded clubs. I can see it flashing there in the background. It's not on my screen, but I can see it in the background. Let me think of the page right. So, I've lost my chain of thought. Where was I? So listen, as a football club, we're after success on the pitch ultimately, and I suppose we found you only gain success through consistency in terms of performances and results, but ultimately consistency only comes through the momentum side of things. And I think once you've been consistent with the group of players that you have, keeping hold of them is the hardest part of the job. Especially for a club like us who aren't in the business of giving higher wages out than what they're already on. We're just not that type of a football club. We can't do that. And to be honest, not many clubs at our level in this day and age can do that. So it's going to be tough. It will be difficult. We know the vultures are circling, but listen, we've got to do what we can do. We want to keep the 90% of the players, as always, as happened last season. Players fall by the wayside, players retire. But our job as a football club, I'm not just talking in Bernard, our job as a football club is to have a plan, is to be ready. If the worst is to happen, and I say the worst is to happen, it's not the worst at all, but if the season gets null and voided, our job as a football club is to immediately start planning, have a real strategy in place for putting our plan together for next season and longer term as well. We as I say, as a football club, we've been through hard times, but we've got to use this as a springboard. I'm going to say you know better than anyone, because you've been sat with me and Byrne in meetings and in training and talked about the plan that we put in place 2.5 years ago. So to start seeing the fruits of our labour sort of starting to come through now is what it's all about. So what we don't want to do is take a couple of steps back to have to move forward. You look at the average age of the squad without Danny and Grandy. I know you shouldn't do that because they're two pivotal players. If you look at the average age of the squad, it's something like between 23 and 24. It's a ridiculously young squad. And that's what allows you to plan longer term, knowing that you've got potentially that group of players to travel through with you. So it'll be difficult, to answer the question plainly. It'll be difficult, but we've got to believe in what we're trying to sell the players. They've already seen, they can already understand what we want to be as a football club, and they continue to buy into it.
Okay. So you talk there about young players. Two of those players who've moved on, it's obviously Joel Taylor and Will Goodwin. What are your thoughts on that?
But they're brilliant examples of what we set out as part of our strategy. So we've got this brilliant academy, arguably the best in the country in non-league, without a shadow of a doubt. And we said when we came to the door, if the players are good enough, it doesn't matter about their age or anything like that. They'll get the opportunity to play. And I think some take longer than others, naturally. Some come in and struggle. Some struggle with the stage that they're on, and some absolutely thrive upon that. But alongside that, the academy stuff, you also have the model that we've talked about, the profile of player, let's say between, from the age of 24 and below, that gets released from a club, forget what club it is, but gets released from a club. And ultimately, I don't like using this type of talk from a football sense, but ultimately has a residual value on the head. It's stuff we talked about, me, Byrne, and yourself, 2.5 years ago. And the two players that have been sold over the last few weeks, one's come from the path of the academy, and one's come through from another club's reject. But sold both players to clubs higher up. Well, obviously, one a much bigger club, but both for good fees. And that's what we're trying to be as a club. And it's all, you look at defining what success is at a football club, and it's about winning. It's about 3 points. It's about promotions. It's about winning cups and cup runs, but also being a club that can develop your own players, being a club that can develop players that weren't wanted elsewhere, and then giving them a platform to show the best version of themselves, and then being sold for decent fees, 5-figure fees, with add-ons potentially, is what we're going to be as a football club. We know that. We know that we can't do what Fylde do, as an example. What Fylde do works perfectly for them. They sign the best players at the levels. Sam Osborne, Jordan Hume, them type of players are perfect examples of the plan of what they're trying to do in terms of transfers. Ours isn't like that. Ours is finding Joel Taylor's, Declan Weeks, even George Glendon's, Jamie Morgan's, either released from a club higher up where they weren't wanted, or signing the best younger players from clubs further down the ladder. That is our plan. That's our philosophy. That's what we've talked about. That's what we're doing. We've got to continue to do that. So what we've got now, we've got to. It's all right talking about it for 2.5 years, but without selling a player, it's just talk and bluster. Well, over the last few weeks, we've now done both. Yeah. So to be able to sell that back to new players coming in, the current players you've got, and also the club, the supporters can see why we're doing what we're doing. It's got to, for a club like us who are self-sustainable, that's got to be the way forward. Okay.
So on Twitter, I think lots of Chester fans follow you on Twitter. They'll have picked up that you've recently signed up to MJ Sports, which is led by Yuan, who was a coach of the club. Talk us through that. People might see a manager being under an agency, something new and a bit different. Can you talk us through that, what the background is, how you've come to be involved?
Yeah, well, obviously Ewan's a very good friend of mine and Bernard, someone we've known quite a long time. He's volunteered for the club in a coaching capacity back in September, October, I think. October it was. A couple of days before the workshop game, actually, he came on board. And he's a fantastic lad, a brilliant coach, top qualified, one of the top qualified coaches in the country. But it was a volunteer basis that he came on board. And he approached us, I think, early mid-December about setting up his own agency. He'd done the qualifications or whatever it is you do, the test, the proper good, the proper test that you do through the FA. He got his agency license through, and mentioned to us about setting that up. Ewan's a businessman ultimately, outside of football as well, a very successful one, has his fingers in all sorts of pies. How he does it, I don't know. He's constantly on the go, that many things going on, kids as well. I haven't got a clue how he does it. But he approached us and asked us about it, and we said, look, you do what you've got to feel like you've got to do. Ultimately, you're a volunteer at Chester. We can't afford to pay you, so whatever comes first, you've got to do that. So he set up his own agency. At the same time, he, I wouldn't say parted ways, because he wasn't ever an employee of the football club. He, as I say, he was a volunteer, although he was helping us out in the football side. He set up the agency. He spoke to us, picked up the phone and asked us about approaching our players to put on his books. And we said, listen, whatever you do as an agent is down to you. I would sooner players work with somebody that we know and trust, as opposed to some of the rats that are out there that are just in it to make a few quid and move players on. Can't stand them. And then he mentioned about us going on board with him. And I'll be quite frank with you and tell you how the conversation, went. We've had agents in the past, a couple of agents, good people, no issues with them. We got rid of both because ultimately they didn't serve us any purpose. We weren't looking to move clubs at any time. And as you well know, better than anyone, that no one ever negotiates mine and Bernard's contracts apart from Anthony Johnson and Bernard Morley. So we explained that to him. And I get the feeling, using our names and being involved with his company, we're almost as ambassadors more than anything else. It gives he thinks it gives his company a bit of credibility by having our names under his banner, I suppose, is the best way of describing it. And then going back to what he asked about the players, he's got so he's got Lloyd in his books, Lloyd My Shoes, who he's got a brilliant relationship with, lives not far from him in North Wales, picks him up, drops him off, or I did do, speaks Welsh to his parents, so I think his parents and his family trust Ewan. Ultimately, what we've got players that have agents that we haven't got a clue who they are. Agent got involved in the Joel Taylor transfer. Again, I'm not going to get involved in that type of stuff because that's not what this conversation is about. But in terms of what a player does, it's entirely up to what they want to do. The agent doesn't have any say or sway in what we do at the club. But to reiterate the point, we would much sooner, and when I say we, I'd like to think a hierarchy at the club. I'm not putting words into anybody's mouth here, but we would much sooner work with a mediator that we know and trust, that isn't trying to get an extra £5-10 out of you as a wage for the client, because that's what happens. Isn't trying to move the player on for the sake of moving the player on so they can make 50 quid, 100 quid. It's working with someone that works in the best interest of that player, because that's all it's about, but also doesn't try to go behind mine, Bernard's and Chester Football Club's back. And I think the trust that we have towards you, Anne, makes it much easier. I saw something on the forum, I think, about the name of the company, and I had to ask him. Ultimately, it springs up all sorts of conspiracies, and his reply was that his sporting icon was Michael Jordan, and I laughed. It made me laugh. I thought, I don't watch basketball or anything like that, but I know who he is. It's like me calling any company I start DB, whatever, because of David Beckham. It's his thing. He does whatever he wants. But I can categorically state it's absolutely nothing to do with me and Bernard. One, I haven't got the time. Two, it's illegal. So, all the best to you. And he's a great kid, love him to bits. And I wish him nothing but luck in his venture.
Fantastic. Right, back onto the football pitch. So this season we've seen some free-flowing football. It's been quite attacking, which I take that as a compliment, saying it's slightly different. Has it been a different approach this season on the pitch, say, to where we were sort of 12, 18 months ago?
Yeah. I think after our first season, which was probably, I know it's going to sound mad when you think about what I've been through this season, but our first season at Chester was the hardest season I've ever had in football. You know that. Yeah. Without a shadow of a doubt, it was tough. I questioned myself as a manager at times. I questioned my longevity in the game at times. Bernard always tries to keep me on a straight and narrow. He's quite ruthless in his thinking and decision making. But I thought that what we needed to do, especially with the new key pre-season trip, and we had the bit of a fans forum in there and fans were asking questions, and the Stuart Murphy input, obviously, we felt like we had to have a real goal in that second season. and it was almost a season of trying to win at all costs. Forget style; it was all about substance. It was trying to win, and I think at times we showed that we showed that we was a real top quality side, but probably relied upon a Kwasi far too often to win us games, and that wasn't because we didn't back anybody else. It was just because he was absolutely flying. Was the main guy, after what he'd done the season before. So last season wasn't about style; it was about winning and trying to win. Obviously, we had our bumps in the road. We had our real bad injury run towards the back end of the season, and then when we sat and had that time to plan prior to the playoff with Alty, that was a bit of an anomaly. We had to get that out of the way before we started the new season. We looked at the players we brought in, and the players that were already with us. You look at George Glennon, Declan Weeks, Brad Jackson, John Johnson, Anthony Dudley. They roll off the tongue, all these type of players, Joe Taylor, Jamie Morgan. You have to play in a certain way to get the best out of them. And obviously, getting the best out of them type of players was by playing the ball on the floor quickly through the thirds and being expansive. Have wide players in the right games, touchline. But in the past, when we've done that, we've only had two central midfielders sat there, and it cost us a little bit, especially if we switched off. So what we decided was having that sitting midfielder, whether it be Paddy Lacey, whether it be Luke Clark, Kevin Roberts did it a couple of times, Gary Roberts came on and did that as well. It gives us that. We hoped it gives us that little bit more solidity in central areas to allow your George Glennons and Declan Weeks to go and join in. We're going to have to look at the numbers of Glenno and Declan, who were involved in 18 goals already. 18 goals between two central midfielders that spent their whole lives and careers sat in front of back four. And we've let the reins off and allowed them to go and play. So we had to play in a style that suited them. There's no point having that type of player in your team. I know we joke about comparing Declan Weeks and Glenno. It's tongue-in-cheek. Absolutely, it is about Iniesta and Xavi. But when you look at the profile of them and the size of them, that's why people will compare them. Not in terms of ability, but in terms of the way they look and the way they want to play. So please don't throw that at me that I'm comparing them to them, because I'm not. It's just that it's one of them things that's been thrown out. So we had to get the best out of them. We had to play into feet. We had to get them on half term. We had to get them driving opposition's goal. And we feel like we did that. A lot of repetition in training in terms of the possession football and overloading the box and getting players in the box. And when you look at the numbers in terms of goals scored, the amount of players that contributed, 3 from Jamie Morgan, Kev Roberts is on the score sheet, central midfielders scoring your wide play, everybody's contributing. I think I worked out last week that between you're off again here, I can't see anything.
I'm back in the room. Yeah.
When you look at Danny Elliott and Anthony Dudley's stats with each other, 15 goals, there are more goals than where Kwasi was at the same stage in terms of the amount of games he played. So we're not relying on one player. No one's arguing how good Kwasi was to us. Can you imagine him in this team? But we're not reliant on one player. We've got a group of lads that are all chipping in. I think every single player, suit that style. Even Big George up top, you hear it off all the times off the players when they talk about him, how skillful he is as a lad. He's starting to understand now what's expected of him. I think his last few performances coming off the bench or starting in the cup game that he did, he was outstanding. So we've got a real good blend of different types of players. Do I feel like we can still get better? Absolutely. Do we concede horrific goals at times? Yes. Is our Achilles heel set pieces, corners? Yeah. We're going to work on them things and get better. But for us, it's about the style and allowing supporters to watch us and understand what we're trying to be and be excited by it ultimately. They're still going to get nagged off at some of the decision making that we make and obviously conceding the last minute against Bradford Park Avenue, which was disappointing. But hopefully they can see the bigger picture of what we were trying to be.
Fantastic. Obviously, your time at Salford's very well known, but where would you put this Chester team currently in all the teams that you've managed and played with, dare I say, over the years?
The best in terms of ability.
Yeah,
the best. The difference when we won the league with Salford was, and I've said this before, the season before we won the league with Salford, we finished 4th, got beat on penalties off Halifax in the playoffs. We were an equally good side. Real attacking threat constantly through a game. But we finished too far behind Fylde despite beating Fylde that season. We felt we finished too far behind Fylde and we needed to make 1 or 2 tweaks and we made wholesale changes. We became the biggest team you've ever seen, full of athletes. We had 3 players 6'5", who could run the 100 metres in just short of 11 seconds. It was a phenomenal athletic side, and we won plenty of games on set pieces and later on in games when we tired, and we were full time. In terms of pure ability, in terms of excitement, in terms of chances that we create, there's not many teams that could touch what we've got and how we play. And when you as a coach, as a manager, you can stand back and you've got an identity and you can see what you're trying to be constantly, whether it be the first minute or the 90th. It always excites you. It always pleases you. In the past, I would have come in after the Bradford game and smashed things up. There's no point in me sitting on the fence about it. I would have hit the roof. But I also accept that this team is on a massive learning curve. It's got some very young players in it, and we will learn from these mistakes. We'll get better from them. That might be next season, or the season after. I don't know. But it's a team that, if we can go back to the question you asked me before about keeping it together and adding one or two little bits to the jigsaw, I think we could be honestly a real machine going forward over the next few years.
Okay. You mentioned Newquay before, and I think it feels almost that was a bit of a turning point in the club. Is that something you feel as well?
Yeah, and again, I often talk about the third person discussing what we've done. And people would have looked at that as if it was some sort of, again, you was there. Albert was there. People saw what we did. We were doing double and triple sessions every single day from 8 o'clock in the morning till tea time. We was out on the training pitch. We had the game. Don't get me wrong, the lads had an afternoon on the Wednesday. The only day was on the Wednesday when Ryan Lowe came down with us and we had a few beers and on the beach and enjoyed it. It was brilliant. But that was a brilliant exercise of getting to know one another, because we had quite a few new players that summer, if you remember. But it felt like it turned from being a relegated club that nearly went under 12 months prior and being part-time into a forward-thinking professional football club with the new analysis department, with the GPS pods that we bought, the sports scientists coming on board. It felt like we turned a corner in terms of what we wanted to be as a football club. It felt like Chester should look. When you look at Chester, the ground, what it is, the supporters, that trip allowed us to think and allowed us to sell to players what we wanted to be. And I think it was a huge turning point of this is where we should be. This is what we should be doing. We do things right. And it's something that we feel, I'm not talking about the Newquay trip solely here, but it's something that I feel as a football club going forward, we need to put as many things in place that allow us to feel and act as professional as we can, even though we've had to take a bit of a step backwards this year by losing a day's training because of obvious things. But we can't lose that identity of acting like a professional football club just because we're still part-time. So yeah, I take your point entirely, and I totally agree with it. I think it was a huge turning point for us, firstly as a club and secondly as a team.
You mentioned there about having to take a bit of a step back this year, and obviously that's something that as a club nobody could have foreseen. But we've seen some real fantastic, players that have come in for free, staff that have come in. Touched on Yuan before. How have you managed it? What's the sell there to bring somebody in free of charge?
The club sells itself. People want to be at Chester. I think I often go on. I don't try to break things down to then build it back up so people feel good. I don't pay lip service to people. I tell you what I think and how I look at it. When we took the job at Chester after a relegation, and people looked at it like, oh, why have we got managers that just won this league? It seems a bit of a far-fetched. How can we afford them? All this stuff has been done to death. Whereas when me and Bernard walked through the door and looked at the ground and saw things, it was like we understood how big the football club was and could be again. It was a privilege coming to the club and being offered the opportunity to manage the club. And I do believe players look at it like that. I don't think players come in and go, I'm going to have a plan and be here for 6 months and then move on. When players come to Chester and see what we're trying to build, they put their anchors down, they put roots down, and they want to grow. When you've been a player like a Paddy Lacey, a Declan Weeks, a Brad Barres, been at Blackburn, Wolves, Sheffield Wednesday, Accrington Stanley. Who was the other one? There was another, Luke Clark, who was at Preston and Accrington Stanley. When players have been at professional football clubs and they come and have to have that journey of dropping down and playing a few non-league clubs at Kidderminster, no disrespect, Southport, no disrespect, them type of clubs, Curzon, no disrespect, and come to Chester, it's a real privilege for them to be given that opportunity. So when we explain the situation, look, you as a board don't get enough credit for the graph that you put in. Obviously, the budget was hit big time last year for obvious reasons, and you told us straight, look, you can sign whoever you want, but the budget's the budget. You can spend the budget however you want. You don't give us any earache over how that should be spent. It's your budget. This is your team. Put a squad out on and I think we signed 14 senior players, but it gone. The budget gone, and it was a case of you can sign who you want, but these are the parameters you have to work within. And we all bought into that straight away, whether that be me and Bernard, whether that be you, Jim Green, Jeff Banks, Nick Phillipson, the rest of the board, Kieran and Adam. It doesn't matter. Everyone understood where we were, and we explained that to the players as soon as they came through. You can sign for us, but this is how it's going to look. But to be 4 or 5 months later and still in the same position, and they're still here. Some of them, you look at Paddy being in and out of the team. Clarkey had to wait till December to get even an appearance. Brad Barres in and out of the team. They're still here. They're not. There's clubs in, because we're second, would have took second place team's players to give them an opportunity, but they want to be at the football club. We have to get that into our minds that we don't have to sell anything to people. People want to play for Chester Football Club, but the type of players we go for generally, other clubs want to sign. So we have to. We're not always going to be able to offer the most money, but we have to be either the first at something or the best at something. I know they sound like obvious statements there, but we need that niche selling point to players. And I think we have that without being able to put what that is, out in writing. I think with all the things we've already talked about, the things that we put in place, the sports science analysis, the pre-season trip, the way we treat the lads, the way the club treat the lads, the way we look after people, the training facility, the King George hub that's about to come alive in the next few months. All the things are our selling point. So players want to be involved. We shouldn't act shocked that people want to come here and play for us. We've got to sometimes look at it and go, why are they here so long? And what we don't want to be is a club that just expects people to come in and play for free. At some point, we've got to start seeing the bigger picture and perhaps rewarding their loyalty to us, providing what they're doing on the pitch is right. And I think we're getting close to that stage now. But listen, they're good people, ultimately. They're good human beings that have come to the football club, bought into what we are, done what we've expected, done no more or less than anybody else, but bought right into the ethos of what me and Bernard are trying to create. Yeah.
Boost the budget was mentioned earlier on in the meeting before we were disrupted. How important is that to yourselves in terms of giving you the maximum budget to sign and to develop?
Can you imagine where we'd be now without the boost on budget? Or would we be anywhere? It's when you think back to what we did last spring, the first time we've done it, Darlington have been known to do it over the last few years, it was rolls on. What we did over a few weeks last spring is hard to put into words. These are the people that have got these direct debits set up have probably lost jobs. They've been on furlough themselves, and 80%. Some of them have been out of work, might not have got a job. But to do what they've done just shows exactly why our model works. Of course, we want the biggest budget from a manager point of view. Of course, we want the best players that we can sign. Of course, we don't have to worry about money. Doesn't everyone in the world want them things? In every walk of life, in any business. But to be able to say we've done it our way by the owners, the CFU members that consistently are there every time we need something, is that out when we can look back and go, the season was curtailed when we finished second. Oh, well, the teams had games in hand around them. Yeah, but look what we've done, look what we've been through to get where we are. Look what we had to do to get a playoff on. Not forget the fundraising for the boost the budget a minute. They also raised money so we could partake in the playoffs for testing. And when players see the supporters doing that, why wouldn't they play for free in the playoffs? Why wouldn't you? You've got to be some cold-hearted person to refuse to play for free when you can see what supporters are doing. So I think that's a big part of it. I didn't mention before with players buying into it because they understand the bigger picture and what might happen down the road. The boost of the budget was phenomenal. The constant support we've had. I mean, we'll talk about the fans not being there. If you remember back to last season, my favourite game since we've been in was the Kings Lynn game. It was the one before the Bradford game when it was stopped. What a night that was. Beating Kings Lynn in the last few minutes and the supporters have been sent off and ran down with them, if you remember. And it's just a win on a Tuesday night, ultimately. But can you imagine what that's going to be like when we build it even more? Can you imagine what it would have been like so far this season if they'd have been there, seeing these performances, seeing what the players are doing? It's an unbelievable group. Honestly, I see what nonsense is going on down the road. All that money, their owners being who they are, and all they talk about in the statements consistently is us. But look what we're creating ourselves. We'll get there. Wherever there is, we'll get there. We'll do it our way, hook or by a crook, but doing it the right way. So it's been a phenomenal effort over the last 12 months. That comes from you guys, the board, the supporters. It's a collective effort. We don't do well on the pitch because it's just good players. It's the whole buy-in from everyone. The 2,500 people that buy into it. That's what it's all about.
You mentioned Paddy Lacey before. I think that was one of the very few negatives this season. Obviously, he went off injured away at Telford. What's the latest on his injury?
Well, I tell you, it tells you everything about what he is as a man. That he's trained probably 3 times since that injury. He's tried to come back and train with a torn ACL and a torn MCL. He had the scan last week. Was it last week? And again got his results back early this week. He's torn his 2 main ligaments in his knee. He's had half a dozen operations on his knees in the past. And obviously he's in a bad way, mentally as well as physically, because even at 27-year-old, he should have another 10 years in front of him, and he starts to question whether it's worth going through what he's been through. He has his own business. When I say he's on the shop floor doing his own stuff, grafting. He's a boxer, so that all these things that he has going on in the background have had to stop too. So I'm absolutely gutted for the fella, because although he's probably been part of 60% of the games, whether it be his ban or his niggles and stuff like that, he's been a huge character for us. Scored a vital goal away at Faz, but driving the lads on. Declan and Glenn was playing as well as they are because of him. 1 behind them, and 2 at times because he's not been in the team, pushing them on. So it's a devastating blow for now, for him, most importantly, but also longer term. But he's a strong kid. He's a strong character. We'll do everything we can as a football club to support him. Whether that be perhaps a fundraising.
I think that was one of the things we were going to mention tonight, which is a real shame. Obviously, we're doing this as a separate recording, because one of the things we did want to launch this evening was, just giving paid really to support Paddy. Through, obviously he's got to go through an operation to support him through the rehabilitation between now, the end of the season, and what comes after that. Because echo your words there, really, what he's given to the club, very long time. He's come in. He's had to pay the petrol money himself, and it's a credit to the bloke that he did that. He's done his best, and I think as a club and as supporters and as owners, we do the right thing to support him.
Yeah, I don't think people probably pick up on what you just said as well about the petrol. They don't get expenses. We're not in a position to give anybody anything. Everything we've got is wrapped up in bills and wages. So these lads are paying out their own pocket just to travel to training.
Yeah.
But somebody like Paddy, and I include the boys that played for free in the playoffs last season, in the years to come will be remembered for a long, long time for the right reasons. I think we saw with Matty Hughes, the unbelievable support that was shown towards Matty Hughes when it happened with him. The fundraising that happened in about 30 minutes for George wearing in his mask. We've got a support base in the country. I don't say that to curry favour with people. It's a fact. And we, to be able to set that up for Paddy, who's going to have time out of work, miss more football, and the rehab process is vitally important for him. So it just shows again, if we can set and hit a target for him, just shows exactly what we're about as a football club.
Absolutely, and I think we lose that sometimes, and we take it for granted. We put them forward for Volunteer of the Month with the National League. Sadly, they didn't win, because I think that would have been a good sign to the National League, the situation we've been left in. Right, I think we've taken up enough of your evening now. Let you go. So cheers for that, and thanks for your time this evening.